Welcome, everyone, to another deep dive into the world of fungi.
Yes.
This time, we're taking a close look at a mushroom I'm sure most of you will recognize, at least by sight,
Right.
the Amanita muscaria,
Absolutely.
also sometimes called the fly agaric,
Yeah.
with its iconic red and white spotted cap.
Mm-hmm.
This mushroom is instantly recognizable and has permeated popular culture.
For sure.
From video games to
Yeah.
cartoons
Yeah.
to high art.
That's right.
It's a species that has captured our collective imagination.
Yes.
But how much do we really know about this fascinating fungus?
Well, I think that's what we're here to find out.
That's right.
Today, we'll be peeling back the layers
Yeah.
of the Amanita muscaria
Yes.
to uncover the surprising science, history,
Yeah.
and cultural impact of this very
Yeah.
noticeable fungus.
So to start off, when we talk about Amanita muscaria, most people picture that classic red cap with the white spots.
Right. Yeah, that classic fairy tale mushroom.
Exactly.
Yeah, but the Amanita muscaria is actually much more diverse than that.
Oh, really? So there's more to it than just that one iconic look.
Yeah, there are various subspecies of Amanita muscaria, some with yellow caps
Okay.
and some with even white caps.
Wow, I had no idea.
And on top of that, recent DNA research has actually shown that some mushrooms that were originally thought to be fly agarics
Okay.
are actually entirely different species.
That's fascinating.
Like take Amanita persicina,
Okay.
which has this beautiful peach-colored cap.
Oh, wow. So it's a constantly evolving field,
Absolutely.
it seems like.
Yeah, our understanding of these mushrooms is always growing.
Right. Always changing.
Yeah, and it just goes to show
Yeah,
we should never stop questioning what we think we know
absolutely.
about nature.
And how widespread is this mushroom?
Well, Amanita muscaria is native to the northern hemisphere,
Okay.
but get this, it's spread worldwide.
Really?
Yeah,
So it's kind of like a global citizen.
that's a great way to put it. A fungal cosmopolitan, if you will.
I like that.
It's found all over the place, and it partners with various trees
Oh, interesting.
in this really fascinating dance of symbiosis.
So it's really interconnected with these different ecosystems all over the world.
Yeah, and that interconnectedness speaks to the complex web of relationships
Yeah.
that make up a healthy ecosystem.
Right. And we can't talk about Amanita muscaria without addressing
Yeah.
the elephant in the room, so to speak.
Right, its poisonous reputation.
Yes, exactly. It's not something you just casually pick and eat, right?
Definitely not, but
But I'm curious, how dangerous is it really?
so while it's true that Amanita muscaria is poisonous, death from consuming it is actually quite rare.
Oh, okay.
And what's really interesting is that some cultures have developed ways to prepare Amanita muscaria
Okay.
to make it safe or safer for consumption.
Oh, wow.
And typically it involves a process of careful parboiling to reduce the toxicity.
So they found ways to work with it.
Exactly. It's incredible how humans have learned to adapt
Yeah.
and interact with the natural world, even when it comes to potentially dangerous substances like this.
Yeah, that's a great point, and it makes you wonder about the history of humans and our interactions with these substances. But aside from its toxicity,
Yeah.
the aspect that often gets the most attention is Amanita muscaria's psychoactive properties,
Right.
which are fueled by compounds like muscimol and ibotenic acid.
Exactly.
And this is where I think the cultural impact of the mushroom really comes into play.
Absolutely.
I mean, think about it. You see Amanita muscaria everywhere in pop culture.
You see it everywhere.
In Mario Kart,
Yeah.
the Smurfs,
The Smurfs, yeah.
those dancing mushrooms in Fantasia.
Oh, yeah. Classic imagery.
It's become this symbol of fantasy and altered states, almost a whimsical icon. But that whimsical image also brings up an important point about the responsibility that comes with portraying potentially harmful substances.
Right.
Especially in media that's consumed by children.
Yeah, because there have been cases where kids have needed medical attention after eating Amanita muscaria,
Yeah.
possibly influenced by those pop culture depictions.
It's a good reminder that even things that seem playful and fantastical can have real-world consequences.
Right. It highlights the need for education
Yes.
and making sure people understand the difference between fantasy and reality.
Absolutely. And so moving beyond that pop culture image,
Yeah.
Amanita muscaria also presents some really interesting puzzles for scientists,
It does.
particularly when it comes to its morphology,
Yeah.
which is its shape and structure. It's incredibly variable, which I understand makes it quite a challenge to classify.
It does. It's one reason researchers have turned to molecular phylogeny.
Okay, so now you're using some big words.
I am.
Could you break that down for us a little bit?
Sure. So molecular phylogeny basically looks at the DNA of different organisms to understand their evolutionary history.
Okay.
It's like building a family tree, but on a molecular level. And what researchers have found with Amanita muscaria is that there are these distinct groups within the species called clades. And these represent separate lineages.
So they're like different branches of the Amanita muscaria family tree.
Yeah, exactly. And by studying these clades, we can learn a lot about how Amanita muscaria has adapted to different environments over time.
Wow, so it's like this whole hidden world of diversity within this one species.
That's exactly it. And it's all thanks to these advancements in DNA research.
It's incredible. And speaking of things that are hidden,
Yeah.
let's talk about those psychoactive compounds you mentioned earlier,
Yep.
muscimol and ibotenic acid.
Yes.
Because for a long time, scientists thought that muscarine was the main player.
Right. Well, the name is so similar.
Yeah, it makes sense.
But it turns out that muscarine levels in Amanita muscaria are actually pretty low.
Oh, okay.
So the real drivers behind the psychoactive effects are muscimol and ibotenic acid.
So how do those compounds actually work in the brain?
Well, it's pretty fascinating. They actually mimic the brain's neurotransmitters,
Okay.
specifically glutamic acid and GABA.
And those are important for...
Those are super important. They're involved in all sorts of brain functions from memory and learning to mood regulation.
So by mimicking these neurotransmitters, muscimol and ibotenic acid essentially hijack the brain's normal operations.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
And that leads to these altered states of consciousness.
Right, and the unpredictability of the effects comes from this really complex interplay between these compounds and an individual's brain chemistry, their dosage, even environmental factors.
Wow, so there are a lot of variables at play.
Definitely, it's not a simple equation.
No, it doesn't sound like it at all. And there's one more element to Amanita muscaria that I just find totally bizarre.
Oh, yeah.
Vanadium.
Vanadium, that's a good one.
What's the story there?
Okay, so Amanita muscaria is what we call a bioaccumulator of vanadium,
Okay.
meaning it absorbs and concentrates this element from its surroundings.
Okay, so it sucks up vanadium like a sponge.
It does, but here's the thing.
Yeah.
Scientists still aren't entirely sure why.
Really? So we don't know what purpose it serves?
Yeah, it's a bit of a mystery.
Wow, that is strange.
Some speculate it might have something to do with the mushroom's ability to thrive in nutrient-poor soils,
Okay.
but more research is definitely needed.
So we have this seemingly simple mushroom with these mind-altering compounds, a complex family tree, and this weird affinity for vanadium.
Yeah, it's a lot to unpack.
It's like a riddle wrapped in a fungus.
I love that, and like I said, we're only just beginning to unravel its secrets.
Well, my curiosity is definitely piqued.
Good.
So let's dive into the actual experience of Amanita muscaria.
Okay.
What kinds of effects can someone expect from this mushroom?
So it's not as straightforward as saying it just makes you hallucinate.
Okay.
The effects are actually really diverse.
Okay.
They can range from depressant and sedative effects to psychedelic and even dissociative experiences.
Oh, wow.
Some people might feel euphoric and energized, while others might feel drowsy and sedated.
So there's a real element of unpredictability to it.
Yeah, it's a bit of a gamble.
And to add to the complexity you were saying earlier, that paradoxical effects are also possible.
Right, so you might actually experience stimulation instead of sedation, for example.
It sounds like the effects can vary wildly from person to person.
They really can.
Yeah.
It all comes down to individual sensitivity.
Yeah.
The specific mushroom's potency, how much is consumed.
Oh, so it's not a one-size-fits-all kind of experience.
Definitely not.
Given that unpredictability, safety must be a major concern.
Oh, absolutely. We have to remember that we're dealing with powerful substances that interact with the brain in complex ways.
Right.
So it's really crucial to approach Amanita muscaria with a lot of caution and respect.
Yeah.
And to do your research thoroughly before even considering ingesting it.
It's not something to be taken lightly.
No, definitely not.
But I'm curious, knowing the risks, do people actually seek out this kind of unpredictable experience?
They do. Amanita muscaria has a long and really interesting history of use in different cultures.
Oh, wow.
And not just for its psychoactive effects, but for other purposes too.
So it's not just a modern-day psychedelic curiosity.
No, not at all. There's evidence that Amanita muscaria has been used for thousands of years
Wow.
in various rituals and ceremonies.
That's incredible.
For example, there are fascinating accounts of its use at wedding feasts in Lithuania.
At weddings.
Yeah, possibly even mixed with vodka.
That sounds like quite a party.
It was more than just a party, though.
Oh, okay.
These uses really point to this deep-rooted connection that this mushroom has to cultural traditions and spiritual practices in different parts of the world.
It's amazing how one mushroom can hold such diverse meanings and application.
Right. It challenges our tendency to categorize things.
Yeah,
And it shows us that nature often defies our attempts to put things into neat little
it
boxes.
certainly does.
So with Amanita muscaria, we see it viewed as a source of food, a poison, a spiritual tool, and a recreational drug.
All wrapped up in this one fascinating fungus.
Exactly. And I think that's what makes it so compelling to study.
Absolutely. So we've talked about the cultural significance and the potential risks, but I'm really curious to hear more about the actual experience of Amanita muscaria.
Okay.
What kinds of perceptual changes can occur?
Well, one of the more fascinating phenomena associated with Amanita muscaria is synesthesia.
Synesthesia, I've heard of that.
Yeah, that's where the senses get mixed up.
Yeah, like seeing sounds or hearing colors.
Exactly. And people under the influence of Amanita muscaria have reported experiencing this kind of sensory blending,
Wow.
where sounds might trigger visual hallucinations
Mm-hmm.
or certain smells evoke tactile sensations.
That's wild.
It really is.
And from a neurological perspective, what's going on in the brain to cause that kind of sensory shift?
Well, it's thought that the psychoactive compounds are disrupting the normal flow of information between different areas of the brain,
Okay.
and that leads to these unusual sensory experiences.
So the brain is essentially being tricked into perceiving the world differently.
Yeah, you could say that.
Are there other perceptual changes that are common with Amanita muscaria?
Yeah, a couple others that come up frequently are macropsia and micropsia.
Micropsia, those sound like something out of Alice in Wonderland.
They do, right.
What do those involve?
So with micropsia, objects appear much larger than they actually are.
Okay.
And with micropsia, objects appear smaller.
Oh, wow. So it's like you're either shrinking or everything around you is growing.
Exactly. Imagine suddenly feeling like you're towering over everything or shrinking down to the size of an ant.
That must be so disorienting.
Yeah, it can be quite unsettling to have your normal frame of reference completely thrown off.
I can imagine.
And to make things even more interesting with Amanita muscaria, these effects can occur either simultaneously or alternatingly.
Oh, wow.
So you might experience both macropsia and micropsia doing the same experience.
So it really adds to the unpredictability.
It makes it even more difficult to anticipate what's going to happen.
It's just fascinating to think about how these perceptual changes are rooted in the brain's chemistry, but also influenced by individual perception and interpretation.
Right. It highlights the fact that the experience of Amanita muscaria isn't just about the chemical compounds themselves. It's about this interplay between those compounds and the individual's psychological and emotional state, their cultural context, and even their expectations.
So it's a truly subjective experience.
Very much so. And, it's interesting that we've been focusing on the intense,
Yeah.
even scary aspects
Yeah.
of Amanita muscaria.
Right.
But it's also associated with,
Yeah.
fun.
Right.
I mean, think about those playful images
Yeah.
we see in video games and cartoons.
Exactly. Like it has this whimsical side to it, too.
Yeah, it really highlights the paradoxical nature of this mushroom.
Yeah.
It's both feared and revered, poisonous and sought after.
Right.
This strange combination of danger and whimsy, all wrapped up in that iconic red and white package.
It's like a fungal Jekyll and Hyde.
Yeah, I like that.
It makes you wonder why this particular mushroom has captured our imaginations in such a complex way.
Right. I think maybe it's because it embodies so many of our own contradictions as humans.
That's a good point.
Our fascination with the unknown,
Yeah.
our desire to push boundaries, our simultaneous attraction to and fear of the things that can alter our perceptions.
I think that's a really insightful way to think about it. And it makes me wonder, what else is there to discover about Amanita muscaria?
Yeah.
I mean, we've explored its morphology, its chemical makeup, its cultural history. Where do we go from here?
Well, there's still so much to learn about this enigmatic mushroom.
I'm ready to dive deeper.
Let's do it. Well, one thread that's really intriguing is the connection to the Sami people,
Okay.
an indigenous group in Northern Europe. There's evidence that Amanita muscaria was actually traded and exported to them,
Wow.
specifically for use in their shamanic rituals.
Shamanic rituals. Okay, now that adds a whole other layer of intrigue.
Yeah.
So what role did the mushroom play in these rituals?
So these rituals often involved entering altered states of consciousness
Okay.
as a way to connect with the spirit world,
Okay.
seeking wisdom or healing or guidance.
So it's about more than just recreation.
Exactly. It's about connecting with something deeper, something spiritual.
It's amazing how one mushroom can have such different meanings and applications across cultures.
It really is. It speaks to that complex relationship that we as humans have with the natural world.
Right. It challenges our tendency to put things in boxes.
Yeah. We see Amanita muscaria viewed as a source of food, as a poison,
Right.
as a spiritual tool, a recreational drug.
All in one.
All in one.
It really defies categorization.
It does. And going back to its psychoactive effects,
Yeah.
you mentioned that people experience a whole range of responses.
Mm-hmm.
Can you give us some more specifics about the perceptual changes that can occur?
Yeah, I'm really curious about that. What's happening in the brain to cause those shifts in perception?
Well, one of the more fascinating things associated with Amanita muscaria is synesthesia.
Synesthesia. Okay, I've heard of that.
Yeah, that's where the senses get all mixed up.
Right, like you might see sounds or hear colors.
Exactly. And people under the influence of Amanita muscaria
Mm-hmm.
have reported experiencing this kind of sensory blending,
Okay.
where sounds might trigger visual hallucinations or smells might evoke tactile sensations.
Wow, that's incredible.
It makes you wonder about the boundaries between our senses
Right.
and how they're all processed in the brain.
Yeah, is it like the brain is being rewired, or are existing pathways just being disrupted?
That's a great question, and it's probably a combination of both.
Okay.
These psychoactive compounds are disrupting the normal flow of information in the brain.
So the brain is essentially tricked into perceiving the world differently.
Yeah, you could say that.
Are there other perceptual changes that people commonly report with Amanita muscaria?
A couple of others that come up often are macropsia and micropsia.
Micropsia. Okay, those sound like something straight out of Alice in Wonderland.
They do.
So what do they involve?
Well, with macropsia, objects appear much larger than they actually are.
Okay.
And with micropsia, they appear smaller.
So it's like you're shrinking or everything around you is growing.
Yeah, exactly.
That has to be so disorienting.
It can be quite unsettling, for sure.
To have your whole sense of scale thrown off.
Totally. And with Amanita muscaria,
Yeah.
these effects can happen at the same time or they can alternate.
Oh, wow.
So you might experience both during one experience.
So it adds to the unpredictability.
Definitely.
It's fascinating how these perceptual changes are rooted in brain chemistry, but also influenced by how a person perceives and interprets what's happening.
Right. It shows that the experience of Amanita muscaria isn't just about the chemicals.
Okay.
It's also about the person's mindset, their emotional state, their cultural background,
Yeah.
and even their expectations going into it.
So it's really a subjective experience.
Yeah, very much so.
It's interesting that we've been focusing on the kind of intense and even scary aspects of Amanita muscaria, but it's also associated with fun.
It is.
I mean, think about all those playful images you
Yeah.
see in video games and cartoons.
Right. There's definitely a whimsical side to it as well.
Yeah, and it kind of highlights the paradoxical nature of this mushroom.
Definitely.
It's both feared and revered,
Yeah.
poisonous and sought after.
Mhm.
This combination of danger and whimsy all wrapped up in that iconic red and white package. It's like a fungal Jekyll and Hyde.
I like that.
What do you think it is about this particular mushroom that's captured our imaginations so much,
That's a good question.
and in such a complex way?
I think maybe it's because it embodies so many of our own contradictions as humans.
Okay.
You know, that fascination with the unknown, that desire to push boundaries, and that simultaneous attraction to and fear of things that can alter our perception.
That's a really interesting way to think about it. Makes me wonder what else there is to discover about Amanita muscaria.
For sure.
We've talked about its morphology, its chemical makeup, its cultural history.
Yeah.
So where do we go from here?
One area that's really exciting is the research into potential therapeutic applications
Ooh, okay.
for some of the compounds in Amanita muscaria,
Like?
specifically mucimol and ibotenic acid.
Okay, those psychoactive compounds we talked about earlier.
Exactly.
Interesting.
Scientists are looking into their effects on conditions like anxiety, depression, even addiction.
So this mushroom that we've been talking about
Yeah.
that's been associated with danger and unpredictability could actually have the potential to help people.
It's definitely a possibility, and it just shows you the power of nature.
Yeah.
How something that can be harmful can also have this potential for healing.
Yeah.
It's important to remember, though, that research is still in the early stages.
Right.
So any potential therapeutic uses are still ways off.
Absolutely. But it's exciting to think about the possibilities.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, stepping back for a moment, I'm struck by how Amanita muscaria seems to hold up a mirror to humanity in a way.
How so?
Well, it reflects our complexities. Okay.
Our contradictions.
Yeah.
It forces us to confront our relationship with nature,
Yeah.
with the unknown,
Yeah.
with altered states of consciousness.
You're right. It raises all these big questions
Yeah.
about what we're willing to risk
Mhm.
for knowledge, for experience, for a glimpse beyond the everyday.
And where the boundaries lie between our inner and outer world.
Exactly. It challenges us to really think about those things.
And I think that's what makes this deep dive into Amanita muscaria so captivating. It's not just about the science or the history, but about the deeper questions it raises.
It's about expanding our perspective.
Yeah.
And embracing those mysteries that nature throws at us.
Well said. So, as we wrap up this exploration of Amanita muscaria, what's one key takeaway you hope our listeners walk away with?
I think for me, the most important thing that Amanita muscaria teaches us is humility.
Yeah.
You know, this one species can be a source of food, a poison, a spiritual insight,
Right.
even creative inspiration.
Yeah, it really shows us how much we don't know. Exactly, and how our understanding of nature is always evolving.
That's a message that goes beyond just mushrooms.
It speaks to the importance of curiosity, of lifelong learning, of approaching the world with wonder and respect.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for guiding us through this fascinating deep dive into the world of Amanita muscaria.
It's been my pleasure.
I think we all learned a lot today.
I hope so.
And for our listeners out there,
Yeah?
keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep diving deep into the wonders of the natural world.
Absolutely.